So I've been wanting to do a video about Wano for a while now, but first I wanted to make sure that anything I said, positive or negative, wasn't coming from a place of recency bias or the heat of the moment. Plus, everyone was doing videos on Wano at the time anyways. So I decided to sit on it for a while to let the arc fully sink in and to have a chance to see how I felt about it months after its conclusion. 4 months later, and I can now say that some of my strongest opinions on the arc have done a complete 180, while some, no amount of time can change how I feel about. So for today's video, let's take one last dive back into this 4.5 year long, controversial, saga ending arc and go over the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yo, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to the channel. You know who it is. It's your boy, the Nature Boy. Woo! Back with another video for you guys here today. And today we're going to be doing a Wano arc analysis, I guess you can call it. We're going to dive deep into the Wano arc and dissect it now that it's been 4 months since it's finished. And I'm going to discuss the good of the arc, the bad of the arc, and the ugly of the arc. So the way I want to do this is I want to discuss it in threes. So we're going to mention 3 of its best moments, 3 of its worst moments, and 3 of its absolutely most ugliest moments, which are even worse than the bad ones. And I want to increase the intensity as we go. So for example, first thing I'm going to mention is a good moment, then I'm going to mention a bad moment, then I'm going to mention an ugly moment, then I'm going to mention a better moment, a worse moment, and an uglier moment, and then I'll mention the best moment, the worst moment, and the absolute ugliest moment of Wano. So with each threes, the intensity will pick up on how I feel about them, you can see. And specifically with the bad, I will try not to cover individual characters and their flaws, such as like Big Mom and Kid. I made separate videos on those. You can watch them if you want. I'll put an info card up here. But if it's just an individual flaw to a character, no matter how big or small, I won't cover it unless it significantly impacts the arc as a whole. So if that character's flaws drastically changes the entire arc as a whole, then it's fair game. Otherwise, I'll try not to focus too much on it because basically I want this video to be about Wano arc as a whole and not any individual characters. Alright, and with that, let's get right into the video, and immediately we're going to start off with number 3 of good, so the third best moment, and for me this is all of the Straw Hats getting a fight. This was great because we haven't seen this since Enies Lobby, and that has been well over 10 years. Back then we had a much smaller crew, but everyone got fights. Sanji, Robin, Sanji, Nami, Frankie, Usopp, Zoro, everyone did. So now that we have Frankie, now that we have Brook, and now that we have Jinbei, the crew is much larger, and it was harder to do this, and I understand why Oda doesn't do this every single arc because it's very time consuming. But with Wano already being a giant arc, I'm very glad he took the time to give all of the Straw Hats their individual fights. I know how much the fan base loved seeing Robin especially have her fight with Black Maria, because with guys like Zoro and Sanji, they're always going to get their fights anyways. Nami and Usopp's fights weren't particularly great. They weren't bad, but they weren't great. But fights like Frankie's fight, Jinbei's fight, and Robin's fight, beautiful. That's all we can ask for. They don't need to be the longest fights in the world, but if they get a fight, that's good enough. So number 3 was all of the Straw Hats getting a fight. And unfortunately, this is going to be a perfect segue into my bad, because my third worst moment in Wano, the number 3 for the bad, is going to be that the Straw Hat fights were too short. And I know they don't have to be the longest fights. They really don't. They can be very simple and concise. However, I think they were too concise. And my issue with this wouldn't be as big if we didn't have other things in the arc being dragged out. Like all those unnecessary characters he introduced earlier on, or all that stuff that was being dragged out in the final raid. You guys know what I'm talking about. I'll mention some of it later on too. For ugly, some of the worst stuff was dragged out. So if Oda had just taken the time to cut out a little bit of that, which I think none of us needed nor wanted, and given us some more time with the fights like I think Frankie's was alright, but fights like Robin's and fights like Jinbei, hell, even Zoro and Sanji, for Zoro's fight to be that short for a Zoro fight, I was kind of disappointed. I think the Zoro fight, the Frankie fight, the Sanji fight, and especially the Robin, sorry, not Frankie, the Robin fight, the Jinbei fight, and then the Zoro and the Sanji fights. But especially the Robin and Jinbei fights could have been longer. They could have been good. It felt like Jinbei's fight was simply there for the dialogue of finding out about the sun god Nika and that lore. And as soon as he got Who's Who to say everything he needed to say, he lost to Jinbei. It was like Jinbei was listening to him, he got everything out he needed to say, and he beat him. Didn't really feel like there was a threat, didn't really feel like a real fight. Like Enies Lobby, they all had good fights, and they had to fight for that win. So, besides Sanji and Jabba, but... So that's going to be my bad. It's not the worst, but it was bad enough to make it on this list for me. And another perfect segue here, speaking of what I was talking about dragging on certain things in the final raid of Onigashima. The third for ugly, the third most ugliest moment for me, which is worse than all of the bad moments, is dragging out Orochi and Kanjuro's death, man. I mean, those two deaths were dragged out for so long, especially Orochi, that I think by the time they died, A, I didn't even believe they died. B, I barely noticed they died because I also remember it was in such an important chapter of the series where the chapter had so many highlights. That was one of the least important things, so I barely even noticed it. And C, nobody cared. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say no one cared by that point about their deaths. It did not matter. Even though he did it in a poetic way with Hiyori and Denjiro, it could have had so much more of an effect if they died earlier on. And again, Kaido is the main villain of the arc. It's okay to kill Orochi a little bit prior to the end, right? Because if you kill him at the exact same time you kill Kaido, it's going to be significantly less impactful than if you give him his own like big chunk where he's the only main villain that dies in that area. And then later on, Kaido dies. That's how I see it. So this is the third most ugly moment for me. And now back to good. We're going to go to the second best moment. And this is going to be controversial because some people feel really bad about this. Some people feel really good about this. I feel really good about this. And this is going to be their Gear 5 reveal. This was very interesting. I'm not one of those that believes either that Oda had it foreshadowed from chapter 1 or that he didn't. I don't know. I leave that open. No one knows. I think maybe he had some of it planned from chapter 1 and like maybe the smaller portions he added on later in. But regardless, to me it ended up working out perfectly. It doesn't need to be an epic foreshadow for it to be epic, in my opinion. And for me it was epic because at the end of the day, when we look back, the clues were there. And going into Wano, there's no other way that I can see myself accepting Luffy defeating Kaido, because when Wano started, we were all thinking it was going to be all of the supernova against Kaido. And for it to be Luffy against Kaido, you would need an ass pull for Luffy to win. You would need to. So it's either going to be a bunch of people defeat Kaido, or Luffy defeats Kaido in some kind of crazy turn like this, where he ends up being the sun god Nika. And I like it because Luffy's devil fruit being more than we thought this entire time without us knowing, I think is brilliant. And I think if we look too deeply into it, of course, just like with anything else, we can find negative traits to it. We can find bad things to criticize about. And it's fair. It's fair to criticize it. It's absolutely fair. We are allowed to. But I think our criticism sometimes clouds our judgment on something, where if this is something that he really did plan this entire time, it's going to be a hard thing to pull off after 25 years. No matter what, you're going to get people that are going to criticize it. So me personally, I think Oda did a fantastic job with it. I think the way it was revealed was beautiful. It was perfect. The fight that continued on after that with Luffy and Kaido was perfect. It wasn't too long. It wasn't too short. It was just a perfect amount of time, and it was perfect. I like everything about it. I liked how we can go back to chapter 1 and see Luffy talking to the fisherman, how he says Luffy is very joyful that day and different like most days. Great stuff. So for me, number 2 on good moments is Luffy's Gear 5 reveal. Beautiful. And number 2 worst moment for me is the lack of connection that we had with the Scabbards. And this is an important one because usually I wouldn't mind, but because Wano was so long, you kind of have to connect with the main, like if you look at every arc, right? If you look at Vivi and Alabasta, if you look at the Skypians and Skypea, you're always supposed to connect with these characters so that you can see through their perspective how it was like to be oppressed by the main villain of that arc. And that's going to want you to see the main villain fall even more, right? You're supposed to feel what they feel. And the only reason I felt this was because of the citizens of Wano. especially in the beginning of Wano with some of the dark and graphic stuff that we got, with that baby with her mother, if you guys remember. But I never got any of this with the Scabbard, even with Yamato and her flashback. The only person I would say I felt like we actually got a connection with was Momonosuke. I would say Hiyori no, Yamato no, and the 9 Scabbards no. And my main issue with this is that Oden's flashback was a very long flashback. It's one of my favorite flashbacks in One Piece. I loved it. I think most of us loved it. But one thing I would critique about it is Oden is already dead. Oden is long gone. He's not going to be relevant to the story as soon as his flashback is over. And as much as I love Oden, I think it would have still make it about Oden, but I think it would have been better to make the 9 Scabbards play a much more significant role in that flashback than just Oden. Maybe cut between Oden's journey with Roger and Whitebeard and them at home and what they're going through when he's gone, Kaido invading. Had we seen the perspective of the 9 Scabbards and how Kaido first invaded and Orochi took over and started torturing them or whatever it is, and then they get this little glimpse of hope of Oden landing back and they're so happy, and we see this through their perspective rather than Oden's, because we saw it through Oden's. And then we see Oden's back turn and walk away, and we stick with the Scabbards for a little bit and see what they have to go through after that and how disappointing that was to see their leader just walk away. I think that would have done wonders for not just the Scabbards, but for Wano as a whole, because we would have been able to connect with the people so much and what they really went through. But we didn't see what they went through. That was like a side thing. We saw what Oden went through. And we're just supposed to feel that while Oden's doing all these happy things, we're supposed to just keep in our minds, oh yeah, Wano's being tortured, they're being oppressed, they're being, they basically being slaves working to build all these factories. But if we don't see it, we can't really connect. So I really, really wish Oda spent more time in that flashback showing us that side so we can connect more with the Scabbards, especially when they all wanted to die so bad in this war. We could actually feel for them. The ones that did die, we could feel for them. But I felt like that was lost. I don't know, maybe it's just me. Let me know what you guys thought. But for me, that's the second worst thing about Wano. And when it comes to ugly, the second ugliest moment of One Piece for me, basically the second lowest thing that I can even think of, has to be everything surrounding that Big Mom versus Law and Kid fight. To me, this has to be the worst fight in One Piece. Maybe I feel passionate about this, but I really hated that fight. Where to even begin in this fight? Big Mom, all of her offense was off screen. All of it. All we got to see was Kid and Law's. And this goes back to my other thing saying that all of the fights were rushed. And they were all rushed so that we can get Kaido and Luffy. Which I feel like he should just cut out more of the stuff that we didn't care about. But Big Mom's entire offense was off screen. Big Mom did not show any advanced Conqueror's Haki, even though we know she has it. She's used it against Page 1, and assuming she used it against Kaido when they split the skies. We don't know, but I can only assume. Why didn't she use it against Law and Kid? And you might say she used it off screen. Okay, but we saw moments on screen, plenty of moments where it could have saved her, and she didn't use it. On top of that, she didn't use her Devil Fruit Awakening. So is she not awakened? Really? She's a Yonko and she's not awakened? Why? How come she's not awakened when she's had her Devil Fruit? Why is it that Luffy's awakened and people who have had their Devil Fruits for a short amount of time are awakened? But Big Mom, who's 68 years old and ate it at, I believe, 6 years old, has had her Devil Fruit for 62 years. She's a Yonko, one of the most experienced pirates on the planet, and she's not awakened? And then if you want to go down the route that she is awakened, then why didn't she use it? Which goes back to Big Mom being dumb and incompetent. So it's just a big loophole of a mess. And then if we're actually going to talk about the fight, how many ass pulls were in that fight? I remember, honest to God, when I was reading that fight week to week, it felt like at the end of every chapter, Law and Kid were dead. They were just exhausted. They used everything they had. And then the start of the next chapter, Big Mom would be right where she left off. Kid would be right where he left off, and Law would look like he just took a whole week off like us and slept, showered, ate, took a rest, and just refreshed. Like, go back and read those chapters week to week. Law refreshed at the start of every chapter. It's like everything that happened to him the chapter before no longer existed. He would always complain about his stamina, and then he was fine. A chapter would end with him down on the ground or like kneeling and exhausted. The next chapter, he's standing up, posing, all cool with his sword. And it's cool to see, but it's kind of like, I don't know, it really took away from believability for me in the entire arc. And it was one of the worst things for me in the arc, experiencing that. And I don't want to sound like a hater. If you love it, you're allowed to love it. Don't get me wrong, there were a lot of fantastic parts in that fight. Seeing Law's Devil Fruit Awakening, seeing Kid's Devil Fruit Awakening, seeing those two work together. There are a lot of good things, but to me, there were a lot of bad things as well. And then the way they ended up beating Big Mom as well, I was not a fan of. Like, if you're gonna beat her because she's out of the story, and now you have Law and Kid. So if they beat her fair and square, now you get to hype up these two characters. You used her hype to hype up them as soon as they beat her. But in the way they beat her, it didn't benefit Big Mom, and it didn't benefit Law and Kid. I mentioned this in my Big Mom video where I talk about the problems with Big Mom, where like the way there was an opportunity missed there, where the way she lost didn't help her or Law and Kid. It didn't help anybody. And if you're gonna take down a big character, it can always help the person that takes them down. Luffy and Kaido is a perfect example of how Kaido's downfall helped Luffy, and all that hype that was with Kaido practically transferred over to Luffy, whereas we didn't get that with Law and Kid. So I was really disappointed about that. And now we get into the top one of each category. So the best, the worst, and the ugliest. And we're gonna start off with the absolute best thing about Wano for me, the best moment of Wano. 2 words, guys: roof piece. Enough said. Roof piece. And you don't even have to be a fan of fights in anime to appreciate and enjoy Roof Piece, because it's story just as much as it is fighting. Because if you think about how much stuff they had gone through in Wano at that time, prior to reaching chapter 1000, prior to reaching the rooftop, everything each of these supernova went through individually, Kid and his stuff from before Wano even started, Luffy and his stuff in Udon prison, Zoro and his adventure with his swords, Killer and the tortures he had to go through while Kid was in prison. He went through the smile foods, all that stuff. Law, all of them. And then for them to meet up there against Kaido and Big Mom, the two giants, generation versus generation, the best of the old gen versus the best of the new gen, 5v2, amazing, absolutely amazing. I don't remember if I ever waited for something week to week the way I waited for Roof Piece. I am right now, that's the way I feel about Bleach right now, but I haven't felt like that about anything else in years, where you're just checking every single day, how long until the next episode, how long until the next episode. And the fight itself was amazing, how we got to see not just all of the characters shine, which is very difficult to balance 7 characters in a fight that only lasted 5-6 chapters, maybe 5-6 episodes as well, and to balance it out perfectly where they all got their moments to shine. Kid, in my opinion, could have done a lot better, especially being Kid, but Killer was fantastic showings. Law was fantastic. Zoro, Luffy, Kaido, Big Mom, and we got to see the way Kaido and Big Mom fight together, and we got to see the way the 5 supernova fight together. And Law, being the fantastic support that he is, the way he meshed perfectly well with Zoro, with Kid, the way Killer and Zoro meshed, the way Luffy meshed with Law and Kid, fantastic. Everything about it. I don't know if there's anything negative about Roof Piece. And for me, obviously, I do like fights, but I don't even think you have to like fights to really appreciate just how good these brief chapters, these brief episodes really were. And I think when Wano's said and done for years and we look back on it, this is going to be the highlight of what we all look back and smile about. Okay, and the number 1 worst moment for me, guys, I don't know if you guys are going to agree with this one or not. I guess it depends how you feel about this character, but for me, the number 1 worst moment is Zoro's flashback tease. This one is an interesting one because I think a lot of us, years before Wano even started, assumed, and apparently in hindsight falsely assumed, that Wano was going to be the arc of Zoro, the same way Whole Cake Island was the arc of Sanji. And it not being Zoro's arc, I'm 100% fine with, believe it or not. As a matter of fact, I actually liked it because of the way the arc went as a whole. Whereas if it focused on Zoro, it might have taken away some of the epic moments. But why tease Zoro's ties to the Shimotsuki clan? Why tease him having a flashback? Why tease his death? His actual death? If you're not gonna touch on any of those things, not one of those 3 things I just mentioned in the actual arc. And With Zoro's death, you might be saying, well, who knows, maybe later on in another arc, maybe when he fights Mihawk, we're going to have a flashback and look back to what actually happened with Zoro and that Grim Reaper. And I could not possibly agree with you anymore. But if we get that and it's epic, that's going to make the arc that happens in great. It's not going to make Wano great. You get what I'm saying? So let's say during Zoro versus Mihawk, we look back and we see what happened with Zoro dying in Wano, right? That's going to make the Zoro and Mihawk fight great. It's not going to affect Wano because it wasn't a part of Wano. We actually ended Wano blue-balled from everything relating to Zoro. Completely blue-balled. He just teased the Shimotsuki, didn't give us anything. Teased the flashback where we got to see a little bit of him meeting the actual sword forger that he didn't know at the time. None of us did. And we cut away. His death, nothing. We just see him. I remember waiting week for week thinking when we finally see Zoro again, it's going to be some Gear 5 epic reveal type shit. Not to the level of Luffy, but it's going to be something big. And we didn't get any of that. So obviously there's a secret there now with Zoro. But the fact that we're not getting it in Wano, one way or another, hurts Wano for me. There's no escaping that. There's no excuse about it. It directly hurts Wano. And to me, this was the number one bad thing about Wano. And the number one ugliest, absolute ugliest part about Wano, the number one, if you're going to criticize anything about Wano, this is it for me personally. And it has to be Kiku and Kinemon's fake deaths. And all of the fake deaths that we got with the Scabbards. But especially those two. Over and over and over again. Oda must have had a good 5 or 6 chances in the arc to kill off Kinemon and Kiku, because Kiku was there for all of those as well. We saw in chapter 1000 how beautiful of a moment that was with Luffy, where Luffy and Kinemon shared that moment and all of the Scabbards were down behind. Kaido is supposed to be the strongest man in the world, the strongest creature, pirate, whatever. He's supposed to be the top dog. Can't you kill off at least one of the Scabbards there? At least one? He didn't kill off any of them. And Kinemon had that great speech. I thought he was dead. I think a lot of us thought Kinemon was dead there, but he wasn't. Okay, we move on. We go into the stuff with Kaido. Kaido cuts him, stabs him. Kanjuro cuts and stabs Kiku. None of them die there. Apparently there's some ass pull with Law's Delver and how it affected him all the way back in Punk Hazard. I thought that was a terrible excuse. But the worst part about all these fake out deaths to me is that as much as he gave Kiku and Kinemon, especially Kinemon, all these moments to say goodbye to us readers and for us to say goodbye to them, all these moments that we were supposed to believe they were dead, he never killed them off. But he didn't give Izo a single moment for us to actually think Izo was gonna die, or B, appreciate Izo, say goodbye to Izo. We didn't get any of that. Neither did we get that with Ashura Doji, but at least Ashura Doji we could understand. Ashura Doji died there. Now, even if we didn't believe it, I didn't believe it. I wish he had a moment, but at least we look back and like, oh, Ashura Doji died, makes sense. Izo didn't get anything at all, and Izo died. But Kiku and Kinemon got to say goodbye to us readers, and we got to spend, basically waste time reading all these panels and watching all these moments in the episodes where they're saying their last words. Oh, Luffy, protect Wano, this and that, and they didn't even die. Why couldn't you give one of those moments to Izo? That's what makes this the worst thing about Wano to me, is that, sure, you want to fake out deaths, that's what Oda does, it's his signature move. We all know it by now, but if you're going to actually do a real death, give it 1/10 of the time that you're going to give the fake deaths. Like, believe it or not, some of us care about Izo, right? Like, I care about Izo. Izo's a whitebeard pirate we saw from Marineford. Besides, like, Kinemon, maybe not even Denjiro. Besides Kinemon, Ashura Doji, and Inuyasha, Izo's one of my favorite Scabbards. So I just wish Izo had that moment, but Izo didn't have that moment, whereas Kiku and Kinemon did, and then they just go on to laugh and celebrate with the Straw Hats as if nothing even happened. They're not even in critical condition after just 7 days. I can't help. I'm not a big criticizer, believe it or not. I tend to like. I never go out of my way to criticize Oda's work, but when things are this bad, I have to point them out. I absolutely have to point them out. And to me, this is the ugliest moment of Wano, without a doubt. So if you guys agree or if you disagree with any of the ones I mentioned, comment down below what you guys think are the best, worst, and ugliest moments. If you think I forgot a moment, let me know down below in the comments. Like the video if you guys enjoyed. It helps out with the algorithm. Comment down below what you guys thought. Subscribe to the channel if you are new for more analysis videos just like this one. I do One Piece theories. I do live reaction to the chapters. I do Bleach live reactions. I do power scaling videos. All of it, it's here. So subscribe if you are new so you don't miss out. And if you guys enjoy this video, then you will enjoy my video on the problem with useless Captain Kid. So I'll go ahead and put that one here for you guys. Go ahead and check that one out. I break down all of the issues that I have with Kid as a character and why his character is a flaw from right now and where it can go to get better. So go ahead and watch that video, guys. I will see you guys there. And until next time, guys, Nature Boy out.